Hello, everyone. I am Maria, and I am the founder and CEO of Ecolens. And this training and workshop is in collaboration with Ecolens and with our amazing trainer for tonight, Victor Okafor. Victor is an alumni of one of our trainings, the Smart Contract Audit training, where he graduated from some months ago. After that, he has had quite an exciting career, I must say. So, Victor, now you're working for QuillAudits, but I'm sure that you can introduce yourself as well and tell everyone what happened after the training. So, Victor is an expert in smart contract audit and also smart contract security. And this is the reason why tonight we'll have this session talking about smart contract security and how to develop secure smart contracts. We all know how important this is in today's world, especially with a lot of DeFi applications and a lot of hacks happening. It's very important to pay attention to the security and as a developer to have the skills to develop smart contracts that are secure. Something very exciting, guys, that we at Ecolens are also introducing and that I want to talk to you tonight is a new feature called soulbound tokens. So for this training, each one of you will receive a soulbound token for your participation tonight. And this soulbound token will be a proof that you were part of this workshop. The soulbound tokens that we're introducing are part of a larger project that we're working on, which will be related to verifiable credentials. So essentially what we're doing in Ecolens is we're building a platform where we want to connect professionals, blockchain professionals with corporates and with companies in the blockchain world and in the traditional world, companies looking for blockchain talent. And with these verifiable credentials, which you will going to receive in each of our trainings and each of our hackathons that we're hosting, you can prove to all the companies about the experiences that you've had and about credentials that you have collected. So for tonight's training, you will be receiving a token like this that you can mint. Later on during the workshop, Prosper, our community manager, will share a link where you can add your emails and you will receive the link to mint your soulbound token afterwards. And with these tokens that you can collect in our trainings, as I said, you can prove your credibility to potential employers. We have heard from a lot of blockchain companies we're talking to that this is critical because there is a lot of fraud also in the world of, when people are applying, they're claiming something that is not true. So with the verified credentials that you will be receiving through these tokens, you can actually prove your experiences and that what you're saying that you have done is actually true. So I don't want to delay anymore. I want to give the word to Victor now to introduce himself. And of course, we can start this training with him. So Victor, please, the mic is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mariam. So let's start. My name is Victor Okafor. I'm a full-time security researcher at QuillAudits. And I also during the free time participate in competitions, contests against top auditors around the world. So basically, today I'll be sharing my screen. So the main goal, like the main topic of today is based on mastering security in the bull run, and why this is important for you to know, like some of the security techniques we auditors use in auditing your code base or protecting it in this bull run. And it's important that wherever you are, if you're a developer or you someone interested in the space or trying to come into the space, you should know some of these techniques and strategies we use in securing the code base. And so I'll be borrowing a slide from Akshay's Silverstaff. He's one of the top auditors, also one of the renowned bond bounty auditor, and he shares about the audit strategies, but this is also kind of general strategies that most auditors use. However, I'll be indicating the ones that I use personally, like my audit techniques and my approach to auditing a code base. And what you as a developer or an auditor or just someone who is interested in this space should also look out for, right? Also, like I want to put out a disclaimer, like most of these auditing techniques are kind of personal, or it might not work for you, but that's why I'm going to share the general ones and also share the ones that I use personally that works for me in protecting smart contract code base. Okay, is that okay? Emmanuel, can you help me confirm if at least it's a little bit louder?
Well, still just a little bit. But if you can just help project, we'll really appreciate it.
All right. So the first topic is first of all, what is an audit? Usually we call it security review right now because it's quite the same thing, where it's simply reviewing your code base to ensure that it works as it's intended to, right? And this process involves like identifying bugs and anomalies and extreme case studies. So basically, security review is like ensuring that every specification you identified and the intention of your code base is met. So it's vetted, is checked around to ensure that there's no bugs in between and reduce the potential of hacking the code base. So mindsets of auditors. So these are the common mindsets we auditors have, and most developers or most people going over the code should also have this mindset. One of the mindset is ensuring that the assumption, basically, what I make sure before I start up the code base is to assume that there's a chance of there being code bugs in your code base. So that's one of the first key things I kind of program in my brain, is that I make sure I assume that, hey, I can find a bug in this code base and reduce the number of code bugs I can find here. And I continue doing that until I feel like no matter how I try to assume it, I feel that there's no more bugs. At least I've reduced to the number of percentage I feel like I can find a bug in it. So that's number one. Always assume that there's a bug in the code base, right? Number two is to always try to break assumptions. That's as a developer, I've seen this in multiple code bases. When developers are building that code, they often try and either consciously or subconsciously, they assume like things work as they expected, right? If they're integrating with a protocol, they assume that, okay, whenever I do this, I'm expected to get back in every scenario, right? So we try to break those assumptions. Some call them invariants, but we try to identify these invariants and see if there are ways we can break them, because most times in runtime, some events might not work as expected, right? And you want to make sure that these events are also handled. In the case of this happening or in case of this happening, what happens in that case? So as a developer, it's good to always identify these invariants and see if there are ways you can break them. Then next thing is to ask questions. We do this a lot, but however, I just want to say based on my own perspective, I usually don't go straight into the whole documentations of like the code base when I'm performing an audit. The reason why I'm doing this is because, again, back to what I said, as an auditor, you want to be assuming, like you don't want to follow the same assumptions as the developers, either subconsciously. So when you know everything about the code base, what is expected to do, how it does it, it affects you to believe that it's working fine. So usually I like going like blindly. What I usually do in the first time of my audits is I first try to know what it's supposed to do, just what to do. Make sure you avoid the how. Like anywhere you try going to the code base and you find out they're trying to explain how they do it more than what it's trying to do, just avoid it in the beginning of your audit, right? This is my own approach, and it helps me just basically not to take the same assumption as the developer and think everything works as it's supposed. What I need to know is, okay, what is the intention of this code base? And later on, as I go through the code, I try to identify, okay, how is it trying to do this in terms of the code base? And that's where some of my attack or threat models click. And so it's exactly the same thing as explained here. Don't fall for the developer's assumption. Don't go too deep in the documentation. Just move slowly and just get over like the overall what is meant to do and not how. So make sure you're able to identify the difference from what and the how. And also, this is what most general auditors see. But again, I'll be truthful with myself. Some auditors prefer complexity because, again, the more complex your code base is, the more likely there is to be bugs, right? And so one main thing I try to do personally is when I go over a complex code base, I try to bring it down as little as possible. I like going over code base that can understand the overall flow, like what is to do, right? I can understand, oh, this is meant to deposit into the contract, and you're expected to get a token representing your shares. And in the long run, you can claim back the shares, and you can also claim back what you deposited. Now that's the overall what is to do. But how it's depositing, how it's claiming the shares, how it's withdrawing, I don't check that, right? I try to find out about that while I go through the code. So don't go too deep into code base and just try to identify what is to do. So that's one of my set of auditors. And now I think most why I had to put this here, use this presentation is because most people try to ask, yeah, how do I get on the audit track? How do I get involved in the security ecosystem, or as a developer, someone who's coming to space, or someone who wants to become a smart contract security auditor in the future, or a security researcher in the future? Well, this is not the list is not arranged like step by step, but this is what our advice. Getting into the basic of Solidity or the code base, you need to understand how to read the code, right? If you're someone who is interested in the security of what you're investing in, what you want to go into, you should be able to understand the basics of Solidity, so that, because in this ecosystem, most of the thing runs in code, and most of the time, the documentation might not be exactly what is to do. The real stuff, like, again, there's a word that says the code is law. So the real thing that does the thing that you said should do is the code. So make sure you can understand the basics of the code. And then we can move forward to understanding the toolings, like some of the tools that we use, like Foundry, with frameworks we use in building the code, in compiling it, in testing it out, and also kind of creating a fork chain of the mainnet and trying to symbolize or try and role play what you are trying to do in the mainnet, right? So this will actually help you if you get to understand this basic thing. And then number 3, I think this is for everyone, even not just developers, but also basically anyone who's trying to invest. Try to know the common smart contract bugs. Trust me, there are basic common ones that's been set out, like been shown to many people that happen consistently, and they still happen to now. Like example, reentrancy. Funny enough, till date, I still see some of those reentrancy bugs happening till date. So number 1 thing you should be able to do is identify the common one, the common bugs that are out there in the ecosystem for many times, and until now there are still people who make these mistakes. So this little thing that you just identify the common known bugs, not basically the complex one or so, will really take you ahead in terms of the security space in the bull run, and especially both the developers and people who are interested in the space. Number 3, you could try out CTF, basically capture the flag or context, and you try out most of this way to just participate to identify bugs, right? And also read past audit reports. Most of the time, there might be an issue that has already been reported before, but some people just read them. Some people don't read them, don't even check about them. And these are kind of the common issues. Some developers still repeat the same mistakes. So try to have this process of taking in past reports, taking in past postmortems. I try to read postmortem at least, even if it's just one in a week, right? Medium does this. If you check Immunify, they share postmortems, and there are multiple blogs that does this. So try to check out postmortems, and you could subscribe to some of this newsletter. Q had by QuillAudits. We also release some of this newsletter every week about hacks that happen and postmortems. And then participate in contests plus analyze them. Now, don't just participate in the contest, but try to get feedback of what you missed when you participate in the contest. I think that's even more important than just reading reports, right? When you participate in the contest, after the contest, if you get the result, try to check, okay, what did I miss in this? Why did I miss it? And how did this person find it? This, trust me, this will go a long way. I think even above all these other steps, even if you're just basically blind at the beginning and just going like not knowing what you're doing, as long as you take back the feedback, that will triple your step, right? You 10x your progress. And then you can also, if you want to get this course, like these things created, you could also take our courses like Ecolance, and you could get this whole stuff created for you. And this is for people that who wants to start up in the space. Why for medical auditors and security researchers that are already in the space, some of the things we do is just follow the top auditors. We kind of just follow them, even both on Twitter, both on LinkedIn. We just try to follow them and see what is it that they are doing to get updated in space. And also, one thing I shouldn't do sometimes, I stop their reports. Sometimes I just try to stop their reports and get into like their mindset. How are they thinking whenever they go over the code base, and how is it different from me whenever I go over the code base? All right, so this is basically the same thing, but get your mindset of finding bugs consistently, because there are two different things from just finding a bug and consistently identifying bugs. And this is where you need to take your step higher to be able to identify bugs consistently. And there are some process we go about in doing it, which basically I have my own process, which basically helped me, and some other auditors have different way they approach code base. And so a lot dedicated time for learning. This is something very important. If most of your days is all on auditing, majority of the time should be on learning. No matter what, if you delay auditing, you should not, at least not delay learning, right? If you say, I can't maybe work on the private project today, or make sure you don't delay the learning part, because that is actually the key thing, right? Most of that, to be honest, the secret is that the difference between two auditors is simply knowledge, right? One know about something and maybe the other hasn't known about it. So the more you know, the more you advance in space. And so, again, back to the approach. I've told you about the audit mindset, the track, the way you come into auditing. But how do you go about performing the audits, right? How do you go about performing the audits? So basically, there are two steps they usually use. Some use the bottom to top approach, and some use the top to bottom approach. And I'll explain it. So when going over the code base line by line, there are some contracts that inherit from the base contract. And now, I actually don't have a straightforward approach I use. Sometimes I use the bottom to up approach, sometimes I use the top to bottom approach. It depends on two things: the time and how large the code base is. So, example, if I am to go to a simple code base where there are not much inheriting, and there's an overall code base that's covering everything, and they're all linked together simply. I use the top to bottom approach. I just get over the overall code base that's covering everything, and then I can dig deep as I go further. And then this is fast, and that's why I also use it whenever the time frame is very little time frame. But the bottom to top approach, where you go through the basic one that have been inherited before you go over the deep code base, is very useful for smart contract codes that that has basically this one small base inheritance contract, and is used in many other contracts. You see it imported in many other contracts. And you know it's best to just understand, okay, what is the base contract doing before you go over the larger ones. And trust me, this approach really helps you in terms of large code base that can be quite discouraging when you start to audit the code base. All right, so there are actually categories of bugs, and whenever you're going through this approach I told you, bottom, whether it's bottom to top or top to bottom, there are actual approaches we take, right? One of the approach is solidity level bugs, right? We have this category of bugs that are under solidity and EVM level bugs. And example is like rounding issues, which I found commonly in like solidity because they don't accept like rounding, right? They always round down, and there's no decimals in solidity. Also, we know about overflows and these common issues. And the issue of external core is actually another topic on its own because it's also a larger category aside just EVM level bugs. So there's also these project-specific bugs. These are bugs that are like specific to the project. Example, like most of the lending and borrowing bugs, you see that often common bugs we know about liquidation, and if there are ways to avoid liquidation as someone who borrows from the platform, if there's a way you can cause the liquidation process to revert. We've seen this multiple times. These are kind of the categories of project-specific bugs, and you should have kind of, most of the time, you start identifying them through experience, through the more code base you review, the more code base you try to secure, the more you start identifying these project-specific bugs. And my favorite of the bugs. And there's the composability bug. But basically what it means is the smart contracts in terms of interacting with other smart contracts or inheriting or trying to integrate another smart contract. This is an issue for the blockchain space often compared to like the Web2 space. Back in when I just do normal Web2, it's not really common to start worrying about composability, right? Because if you're building an app, most of the time it's isolated. Like example, Apple, they don't really share with different things, right? But in the blockchain space, you actually have to think in terms of composability. What if I'm taking a token that's not 18 decimals, right? Example, USDT, USDC, those ones are 6 decimals. And also EIPs, right? If it's a protocol that's involving votes, right? Is it following the EIP 42626? Is it following most of this EIP specification? If your ERC20 token, is it following the EIP specification? This can cause a lot of issues because protocols, developers are trying to integrate your own protocol. We assume that they are following the same EIP specification, and this will cause a lot of issues. So these are composability bugs. And again, external protocol scenarios where you're making external calls. What happens? Because a lot of things actually happen when you make an external call. And this is why it's an issue. Again, even Transit came out from this. It's especially gas bombing, which is been common mostly. And most of these other issues where sometimes they just directly revert on the call. So this is also a known issue, and we should also check out for that. And the last level of bugs is the chain level bugs. Actually, this was not common like in the old days, but now it's very common because there are now multiple chains, there are multi-chains, there are cross chains, and most chains don't operate the same, right? The time on Arbitrum is different from the time on Ethereum, right? And back to what I said about the decimals, USDC and USDT, like the decimals on Ethereum could be 6 decimals, but on other chains like Binance chains, they are not 6 decimals. So these are common issues that I just kind of have in my mind. And as I'm going through the code base, I have my full list of like my audit book or so. And I just make sure, hey, most of these common things are ticked up, right? And then I go specific into my own personal threat model. And again, why I'm sharing this is because anyone can actually start with this. You don't need to be a renowned auditor or a big known auditor to start with these 4 categories of audits, right? There are common EVM level bugs, and some developers haven't like take the time to learn about them to prevent them. Just knowing just these little ones could prevent a lot of times, right? And then the composability box with token decimals, and some tokens don't revert in transfer, some tokens return prudent in transfer, right? And then lastly, we have, lastly, we have threat models, right? Threat models, basically, I think this is where I might spend most of my time explaining, because these are kind of the most important thing, right? And I feel, okay, we have probably 30 minutes left. So, so I can take some time to explain this. Now, commonly, we integrate threat models out of experience, right? Whenever I go to a code base before, I usually, in my early days, I usually just assumed, okay, the user is expected to provide this value. The user can have this amount of money to provide it. The user can logically provide 0 amounts. Yeah, some of these assumptions, some developers also have this assumption. Now, I try to pass in any possible values, input values as possible, right? And sometimes I, keep out some bound ranges where I know can't be hit, right?
Hello, Victor.
Yeah, sorry. Take my listen first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's an issue in my mind. All right, it's all good. Sorry about that. Can you guys still hear me like at least a little bit better? Sorry about you.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you better. Good.
Okay, so back to the threat model. Why I said this is very important, because this is where the actual uniqueness in the quality of the security review we offer, right? It depends on the experience and how do we go about with our own threat model. So these are the common ones, and also after this, I'll be identifying some of the ones I use as my own personal threat model, right? One of it is try all possible input value. Don't take into assumptions that you can't supply this amount, or this address is off limits or something like that, right? Sometimes people supply random things, right? You could supply blacklisted addresses. So addresses that has been banned, that have been blacklisted. Sometimes they could pass in 0 amounts, right? If that is not checked, the code base. And also, another thing is checking all contract states. I'll actually elaborate more on this, because it's one of the core principles we follow is the state of the contract. And that's all what smart contract is all about. It's all about 2 things, right? The variables, that is the storage, whether the amount tracking or everything. And how are these variables changed or taken from one state to another state? And those are like the core things of smart contracts. I'll come back to this around the end of this slides. And the next one is multiple invocation of the same function. What does this mean? Now, in the EVM, like in the ecosystem of like Web3 ecosystem, there are common functions that have been known in the space, right? Example, withdraw, deposits, and this common thing that we know to us, claim rewards, and a lot of them, right? And oftentimes, you could check out the standard implementation of these common functions and compare it with the way they are implementing theirs, right? I do this a lot because sometimes some companies try to add some additional feature and deviate from the standard implementation. And we try to check, okay, is this an issue, right? We discuss an issue in the future. And also, it's also important for clients or people that are trying to use the protocol because they might assume the withdrawal will work as expected with the normal standard, or the minting and the burning will work as expected. But sometimes they try to deviate from the standard implementation or the known way of implementing this common withdrawal and deposit flow, right? For example. And so try to, compare the functions with the multiple known one in the space. Like it compares with, example, the swap way you could compare with how Uniswap are handling their swap, right? Same with liquidation and on and on. And lastly is breaking the order of function execution. Now, what does this mean? In terms of function execution, there's a flow at which again, the developer just assume will happen every time. Back to the example of withdraw and claim, they expect that before you can call withdraw, you should have deposited, right? Now, the question you should ask is, what happens if I withdraw and someone else tries to claim directly after I withdraw? What happens? Will the person get his token? Will he revert? Will it still count like it has withdrawn for the person and still not give him the token? Something like that, right? Just try to, see what happened and sometimes be the bad guy, right? Be the bad guy, be the villain, trying to affect the next guy that is trying to, be kind to the protocol, right? Try to be Joker or Batman sometimes. And the next one I want to actually talk about is actually out of the slides. I would like to, again, these are like common ones, but for this session, I would like to talk about like some of my own approach, which could be useful for someone who might work for them, and for some others, it might not work for them in trying to secure the code base. And why I'm basically doing this is because I have seen it most of the time in the industry where I try to copy like someone's approach and it might end up not working for you. So I like telling you about all of the approach or the general approach, and you could try out what works for you, right? And that's one of the most important things, right? And so what are these approach I'm kind of talking about? I have like my whole book lists here sometimes that I follow. Aside from the usual line by line, I think we all know about this. Whenever we start an audit, again, the first way you should go about it, just know what the protocol is to do. Ignore the hows, right? Don't try to know how is it doing it, right? You will find out about it as you go through the code base, right? And so once I've known like, okay, this is what is to do, this is the intent, because that's one of the main things we need to know. What is the intent of this code base, right? And we've talked about how you can go line by line, if it's, top to bottom or bottom to top, and when you should do either of them, right? And so when I go line by line, my focus is what is it to do, right? What is the intention of this code base? And if I kind of see where there's a slight change of the intention or it's not following the intention, I kind of have this audit tags on them, right? I kind of comment on them and I'll come back to it, right? So this is one of the steps I use. And the next thing is the state machine. I cannot I cannot emphasize on this more. I can't even stress on it more because it's very important, right? The state of your contract is very important. And that's why most of the time when developers do tests, I also advise to perform invariant tests. Now, what's the difference from normal tests and invariant tests? Now, invariant test is following the states, right? Normal test we test out depositing, right? And invariant test we test out depositing, and then what happens after you deposit? What is the next state? What will happen with the amount of the balance increase? And then after checking the balance, invariant test will check, okay, what is the state when I withdraw from this protocol? So invariant test is following the state of the contract. And it's very important because the main thing about the contract is all about the state, right? If you have a contract, if you do something, you're in your current state, right? If you do something, you're in another state. No matter what you do, it will not be in the same state, right? If before you deposited into the contract, there was 500 tokens into it. Once you deposit into the contract, it's now in 550 tokens, right? It's not the same state as how it was before you interacted with the protocol, right? So you should always know what will this state be. And here's the key goal, right? Your main aim is trying to lead this state to see if there's a way you can take it or to reach a bad state. If you can take it to a bad state where it's not like expected to reach, right? It's not expected for the protocol to lose depth, right? Especially when I'm going through lending and borrowing protocol. They don't want to be in a state where there's an over-collateralized debt or there's like bad debt where the protocol can't cover, right? You should always try to see if there's a way you can lead the code base to this bad state, right? And sometimes just be evil, right? Be bad. Try to see if you can break the protocol, if you can, end the world. I don't know, maybe, and see if you can destroy everything in the contract, basically. And so the state is very important. I can't stress on that. So make sure you're not having the assumption of, oh, once I deposit, that's all that happened. Sometimes if you deposit, someone else might be calling withdraw at the same time. Right? What happens if you do that? Or what happens if before you deposit, 3 people front run you and call withdraw 3 times before you, right? The states of the machine or the state machine will be different in both case scenarios. So I always try to follow the state machine and see if I can lead it to a bad state where everything just blows up, right? And so again, I'm going to just go over some of my approach I use, like different edge cases, and I let my mind wander. So here I want to talk about my mental modes and some common mental modes they use. One of the mental modes we use is comparison modes. I've talked about this before, where you compare like the function, the normal function of what the contract is implementing versus the normal industry-wide known way of implementing this function, right? Another way is like the cases of like mirroring. Example of mirroring is like opposite function, right? If you're minting, the bonding should do the exact opposite of minting. I think just knowing this alone will actually take you far, right? If you're depositing, the withdrawing should undo what you've done in the deposit, right? And these are common stuff. And guess what? Sometimes developers miss out this stuff. They might change the states when depositing, but they don't reset it back when they withdraw. And that's an issue, right? And then there's the other state of, like, some people do this, especially in the terms of bounty, although I don't do bounty because I don't kind of have time to do all those kind of things. But when you do bounties, some use speed run. Speed run is basically all their focus is, where is this asset going? They are focused on these 3 things, right? And if you're the developer, you should also know the flow of these 3 things. One is the assets. You should be able to know the flow of the assets, right? Where is it going? When I deposit, where is this deposit going? When I withdraw, where is it going? How do these assets flow? How does it come into the contract? How does it go out of the contract? When it comes to the contract, is there a way that assets is stopped in this contract, right? Then the second thing is in terms of actions. Funny enough, there are different ways different people can lead the action to like different states. What do I mean? For someone who is providing liquidity into the contract is a different action for someone who is borrowing from the contract. They don't do the same thing, and they don't cause the same effect. They lead to two different states, right? So you should know the action. And the last one is what I've just actually mentioned in the last one, and is the actors. Who are the people involved? Are they going to be liquidity providers? Are they going to be like, who are the owners? Are they going to be owners or ownership or governance in the protocol? What are the normal users? What is the normal step for normal users? Because trust me, there are always different action they perform, right? What a normal user will perform will be different from what a relayer or some call them feelers we do to an order that we proposed, right? So you should know these three things, and this will help you in the bull run. Why? Because in the times of like where the market is rampant, different actions are happening, different actors are performing different action and leading to different states. You should be able to know what these actors is to do and not to do, right? Okay, so we should be able to identify these three things. And then the other three, again, these are for developers. I like to share this to developers because I tell even my clients that we go over in performing private audits and at QuillAudits, we try to educate them about this kind of things, right? And one of the core things is like your tests, right? Sometimes we use the tests as another way to see the protocol, because your test is how the developer assumes the user will interact with the protocol. And we kind of leverage on these tests to see what is your assumption and see if we can break it, right? So you should have good tests, and they usually call it the black boxing. Some auditors call this that, where they use the test as their guide for auditing the protocol. And okay, the last one is what should happen and what shouldn't happen more. So basically what should happen is, these are the intents, right? These are what I intend on this protocol to do. What shouldn't happen are the invariants. What I want, no matter what, should not hold, right? Should not happen, right? Or the invariant of, no matter what, users should be able to withdraw their funds, right? That could be an invariant. And what shouldn't happen is also another invariant. And so using this mode is also like a threat model we use, and really helps because sometimes developers only cover what should happen and they don't cover what shouldn't happen. And that's a big issue, right? It's a very big issue. And I think those are the main models or the threat models we use. And based on time, we'll be closing off. And however, I'll just rush through some key questions, some of the few questions that you should be asking as a developer when you're going through your code base, as someone who is trying to go over a code base to invest in the token or something like that. These are the key questions you should ask, right? One of these is like, in terms of actions, I have a question, these are questions on like, in terms of actions. One action is an action, you have a question on what would make this action revert. Example, claiming or withdrawing should revert if you don't have the enough amount, right? No matter what should happen, if you don't have the enough amount, it should revert. That's one of the questions we ask. Another one is an action will not silently work, right? It will not work as intended if so is provided, right? If, let's say, a user or a straight happen, or this condition, if it's in a liquidation state or is in a particular period, sometimes it might silently not work. You might think it's working, but it might silently work. not work. Example are silent overflows, which happens often. Then the next question is, an action will work if this state, like if this action happens before it, right? You should be able to claim only if you've deposited ahead of the claim, right? That's the only case it should work. For no reason should a claim work when you've not deposited, right? We try to check this, we try to ask these questions. And the next one is, an action is, at the last one there. An action should not leave excess funds in the contract. Now, this is in the case of assets. I actually happen to find the actions that affect the assets, right? If I'm depositing into the contract or I'm withdrawing from the contract, am I depositing into the contract and the excess funds, what happened to it? What happened to the excess funds? Is it handled? Is it maintained? Or how does the contract handle this, right? And there are a few questions, but I would like to just maybe end it there because there are a lot of questions we ask. And as you go over this project, this code base, you kind of find out these questions that you have to ask. And another one I also check about is in terms of edge cases, right? In terms of minimum and maximum amount, what happens if I supply you into type you into 6 marks, right? What happens if I do that, right? Or if I'm casting into a smaller amount, what happens if I supply a very small amount, right? This is also another case of what happens in terms of open and close, right? If you are trying to close your position or trying to, let's say, end an order, what happens in the open? What happens in this kind? They call them the corner case flow, right? Before you close a position, what happens if you've not opened it, right? And so these corner case flow are also important because claim, reward, withdraw, meet, bond, open and close position, all these are kind of affected and are linked together in terms of the flow, right? You're able to know the flow of everything. Okay, so I think we're almost out of time. So I'm just going to go over, these are some people audit process. They kind of clone the project, they find it on Interscan or the GitHub, they clone it, have 2 clones, the main first one that's unchanged. And I usually do this, I try to clone it from a particular commit, right? The commit of the change. I use Git checkout to get the particular commit, and I kind of create my own branch sometimes, right? And then there's also divide the audit duration into 3 phases. My phase is, I think for actually his phase is 20% on time going over the code base, 60% on the remaining, and then 10% on the last. Well, mine is like 10% in the beginning, you go over the code. Again, I don't spend time understanding how it does it, but just what it does. And I actually, honestly, I don't use diagrams, but some people diagrams might be good for them. But for me, I personally don't use diagrams. And I always use diagrams and I use Miro for my diagrams. Miro, sorry. When I'm trying to explain it to someone else or to another auditor, I use diagrams. But in terms of the state machine, I explained to you guys, diagram will help in terms of identifying the flow of the contract. That's why it's not basically the design of the contract, but the flow. That's why I use diagram. And then I spend most of my time in manual review. And this is where I implement those threat models. I tell you those categories of bugs and all those stuff I mentioned. And lastly, this is where I resolve the tags I put in the code base as I was going through it. And also, again, go over the last threat models, with this time with niche edge cases in the last case and writing the reports. And so lastly is tools that I use. Again, I personally use VS Code. I don't know which other code editors some people use. Visual Studio Auditor. These are some of the extensions we have for putting auditors and for, helping me identify which are the state variables, which are the local variables, because they are important. These are the 2 things important: states and the variables that are created in the contract, right? How are these variables affected? Because if you do a function, the main thing of a function is simply affecting the variable. That's basically the main thing of the function. and it's quite easy if you understand it this way. And then there are tools I use. Actually, I use this AM calculator a lot. In terms of calculating AMs, like automated market makers, like Uniswap, what happens in terms of an arbitrage, because it happens a lot, and MEVs. I try to protect against MEV, front running, and what happens if I make a deposit of this token into the pool and withdraw out of this pool? What is the next state of it? So this is what I use, AM calculator. Some of these big number calculators, I don't try to rely on my brain. I try to use the calculators for these big math equations. And then these are also important things I use personally in QuillAudits. I use QAI and QCheck, aside from Slither, because I think I even have them pull up. Yes, these are the tools here. I have QAI and QCheck. Now, these two are quite important. In terms of QAI, just look, I can simply upload the contracts here, and I get my results, or I can get from scans from different chains, from Polygon, BSC chain, and perform audit directly from an interface without having to know how Slither works or so. So a friendly user interface. And lastly, these are mainly for techs or people that are trying to invest in the space. I don't just go into any tokens. You can actually know if a token is a bad token or a good token, or know the state of the quality of the token by simply just scanning the address in this place. And it will give you a % rating of the score and risk assessment of this token before you invest. And I feel this is one of the most important tools in the space right now in the bull run. And so that's basically the tool. And lastly, just closing tips is, again, make sure you don't get burnout. Sorry, that's it. This is very important. Make sure you take breaks. You don't get burnout in audit. I usually take time, and most of my time is on sleeping, surprisingly. And so don't get burnout. Compete sometimes in contests. Sometimes I just take out of my free time to just make sure I actually compete, because there's different from just auditing and competing, because you get to see what you miss, how to advance, and it helps you in your next time you're performing audit service to other people. And yeah, don't go too deep in the box. This is actually very, I've explained it. Just try to know the words, and then as you go to the code base and find out the house, you can then go deep into the box. And yeah, so that's the closing thing. Twitter is topic, and I think I'll give it back to Emmanuel.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So please, I would like you to drop the two links, QAI and other links. Are they public link or is it private software? You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I think now it's open to the public. Yes. QAI.
Okay.
And more are coming up, especially Q Monitor, which is also coming up to monitor.
Yeah, you can just drop it in the chat session, the link, so that the developers can check it. So we have some questions. I would like to read them out. Thank you very much. Please, if you have a question and you want to ask, you can use a show of hand. Just go to reaction and just show you, and I can call you. But I can see some questions here. Somebody is saying, Ismaila said, what is your stand on other smart contract language? There are some very unpopular languages like Plutus, Malawi, and others. Yeah, for example, Rust too, it's a great one, and I love it because it becomes more popular day by day. Move is also another language that is making wave in the space. So what is your stand on those smart contract language? So are you talking as regards the audit, or as regards the smart contract language in itself, like what it can do, how fast it can process information? Well, Victor, just give your own perspective though.
Okay, in terms of, the space is actually going wild and wider, and it's good to catch in on the opportunities now. In terms of this language that are coming out, personally, I actually prefer to build on my main strength, right? Before I actually start trying to get into other countries, right? I want to make sure that, we also have this one main strength and one weakness. Some people that main strength is on, writing test cases and most of this forcing and trying to break the protocol. And some of our main strengths are like critical thinking. And so I try to make sure that I have fully strengthened like my strength before I even dive into other languages. So before I even went into Rust, I was quite very, very strong in Solidity. And I want to say I'm very strong in most of this one before because yeah, that's basically my course.
Much for that. I saw someone's hands up. I don't know. Okay, please. Oh my God, I don't know. I don't want to murder this name. So Le Monde des Algorithmes. This sounds like
Yeah, it's me.
algorithm. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Please. I saw your hands up. Can I ask a question?
Okay, one of my question is there was a part in the presentation says try all the possible inputs. Actually, what I thought is like let's say we have a project right now, and in the project there is a pool consists of USD Tether and Ethereum, wrapped Ether actually. Let's say in the protocol it says us that the amount of reserve, I mean Ethereum reserve, can't be less than 5 Ethers, or there is a price range. But I want to see under some circumstances it can be less than it. I mean the invariant doesn't work. In such case, I believe I do fusion test. I just want to test it with random values and see if it works or not. Normally, what I learned for such purpose, I could use Eşitna. However, in one of the contests, I said that when I have so many fusion tests, it doesn't work well. What I mean, it works, but it works in several days, like 2 days, 3 days, etc. Are there some better alternatives to use?
Yes. So that's also a very important thing. Yeah, most times where it could be different type of token interacting with it or different types of addresses. So you should be able to have pausing tests integrated into a protocol. Personally, I use Foundry. And also because Foundry now has invariant tests involved. And I've also explained the difference between force test and invariant test. Invariant test is a kind of forcing, but also tracking the state along as it falls, right? When you perform a force, you try out, let me say in the first round, you try out amount 0, and you go over what should happen. And when the test is over, it will go back to the old states and start again with a new value. For invariant test, we follow up, okay, what if, okay, next time I try this one, it will save the next state. Okay, next time I withdraw, save the state. And this is why invariant test and force test are both important to be in your protocol. Another step I try to use in this kind of scenarios where I know there could be wrapped ETH or different type of tokens, I kind of take note of the common ones, right? I just try to know the common ones and tick them out in the scenario of this ones, and basically even before I start using the test. But again, force tests will go like far. Like you could try different scenarios with just a force test than what your brain will have tried out. We're trying to test out 5 different type of inputs. But force tests, we try different random type of inputs, and it will be very helpful.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for that question. Thank you very much for that answer. Somebody's asking that will you say the same approach work for all languages or just Solidity? Because different auditor always give different opinion.
Yes, again, like as you go, right? As you go through the auditing process and the auditing tracker, as I mentioned, you start identifying what works for you, right? And that's why I had to just share the general ones that are commonly known and currently used by top auditors in the space. And then you start finding the ones that work best for you. However, there are some that are quite specific to, Solidity and, EVM compatible chains. And there are some that are just general in terms of general audits, right? And that's why it's good to know these 4 categories, know the EVM level bugs, know the project specific bugs, because regardless of the chain, the cases of liquidation, trying to stop the liquidation, or in the cases of, bridging, and you're bridging an asset from this chain to another chain, those are actually stuff that, regardless of the chain, these common hacks are known. And that's why we see some hacks that are not even from Web3. There are some strange hacks that comes from Web2 space, and you can still replicate them in Web3. So it's good to know this common project-specific rules. And lastly, composability, which is just basically for the blockchain space. And last one, cross-chains, because regardless of the chain, if you're using Solana or using, there's some cross-chain implementations that can cause issues.
Wow, okay, yeah, that's a beautiful one. I don't know if anybody has any question. I'm just checking through the I'm checking through the chats box and trying to see if there are questions. Okay. Yeah. Any other question? Okay, so if we don't have any other question, please, I want to employ everyone on the spot.
I have
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
on methodology.
please.
Actually, it may be my how to say mistake. When I first start to an audit, what I do is first of all I look at the documentation and I ask some questions on the Discord, read the questions, etc. But when I was looking to the documentations, I always take notes on a notebook and try to remember the things for the next audits, etc. But it gets my 1 or 2 days. It might be a mistake, as I understood from the how to say presentation. And what I do next, I try to install the dependencies, set the system, etc. And then I go to the manual analysis, do tests, etc. and other stuff. However, I believe I can change some things. Can I get some insight on it? I mean, on the methodology. Maybe I'm wrong about writing so many things on the notebook because I spent so many time. I mean, I thought about it.
Sorry, Emmanuel, can you help me like summarize the question? I don't really know exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's asking, I think what it means is that for him, he does a paper pencil approach to auditing. And he's like, is that advisable? Summary, that's what I was trying to say. He does a paper pencil approach. Sometimes he has to still use his pencil and paper, go line by line and just, see, take out box of line 13, reentrancy, stuff like that. Yeah. So he's asking that, does this still work, or maybe he's still old at school?
Yeah, actually, I don't. But for me, basically, I don't advise, again, I thought about knowing the common box, but it doesn't mean that, have reentrancy and try to find every other stuff on reentrancy and contract, and then
No,
go to the next list.
not like that, but what to say, for example, there are some writings like where to attack or what are the invariants. I actually note these things. And I just, for example, let's say we work with layer 0 and I try to understand what is layer 0. Because if I don't know about the system, I can't go for it. I can't defend or attack to a system that I don't know. I mean, but the problem sometimes, okay, I just write the summaries, but sometimes I exaggerate the thing and write so many things. And I write them because I want to use them for the later audits or even in my life. Yeah.
Yes, so my advice in this scenario is, in terms of trying to find out about a protocol, again, we have to be careful not to get stuck in the rabbit hole, right? Because it will be so hard for you to come out from the rabbit hole. And that's why I also put it in the presentation. Don't get deep very early, right? Again, what you said is very important. You need to know about like what the protocol is before you even audit it. Again, make sure the keyword what is in your main mindset. Don't try to find out how it's doing it. Try to know what this protocol is. If it's integrating another protocol, let's say before an audit, you could take the time to do this. But when the audit commences, right, just try to know what it's doing. And when you reach the places where it's making the interaction or the integration of another protocol, where you need to learn about that protocol, then add a tag on it. And when you're done with the first line by line, make sure you come back to those tags. Try to find out about those protocols specifically, because I've actually found out some bugs that are due to just what is integrating to, and not what is on the contract, but what is integrating to. I have submitted this sometimes, and I've shared it sometimes, and it happens a lot because it's kind of the blockchain space, right? Due to composability, where they're mostly integrating different protocols. And so take the time, like in knowing what, but as you go to the code base, that's when you take the time to know about how. Just to prevent getting into the rabbit hole, because sometimes it could be frustrating.
Yes, yes, yes. Like you said, one of the points is don't overstudy documentation, right? That could be another rabbit hole for you because it just goes from problem one to problem two and just keep going. So yeah, thank you very much, Lemonde. I want to know how to pronounce your name well. Please, can you help me? Hello, are you there?
It's
This
Le
is
Monde's
Lee.
algorithm, and thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, Lemonde de algorithm.
French, right?
it's
Okay,
in French
right?
actually.
yeah.
It's
It's in
French, right?
French, and it means the world of algorithms in English.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. That's beautiful. God of algorithm. That's beautiful. Okay, so thank you very much, Victor, for this call. The recording is going to be available. We'll let you know when the recording is going to be available. So you can always check it out. Go to the recordings, listen to what Victor, the tips that he has dropped, and use them. I don't know, Victor, can you drop your LinkedIn or maybe Twitter? So if there are questions, personal questions, they can reach out to you and they can just always, give you a chat and connect with you on LinkedIn. It's always good to connect to each other. Who knows? Somebody might have a gig or whatever and need somebody to help, can always reach out to you. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining the call. We're going to be having another session again next week, and I think everybody should be at alert for that session. It's for both developers, non-developers, anybody in the Web3 space. Everybody should, join next week's session. I'm going to have another session next month again. I'm working on bringing guys from Rust Foundation, guys who do Rust, people from Solana Foundation, people also from Polkadot Foundation. So guys who have worked in that space to come share their knowledge with the community, especially developers. So thank you very much for following Ecolans and also Tech Fiesta. We have a lot in store for you, trust me. So thank you very much, Victor, for your time. Thank you very much, the community. Have a lovely, lovely weekend. Weekend starts tomorrow. So yeah, bye.